once you get married, you've arrived.
Big mountains take big teams.
I've always been a big fan of changing my environment.
I needed that car accident to wake up. Friends, today I have Andrew Anderson with us on the podcast. He's an author, a speaker, and a breakthrough coach. So Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Jen, thank you. And as always, gratitude goes out to the listener because they're the ones that are joining us today.
They are joining us today, and we get to hear your story, which empowers so much of us because we have these setbacks in life that in the moment can feel overwhelming, no place to land, can't make sense of it. But then if we figure out how to keep going, magic happens. And your story is a testament of that, if any story is.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to share a story if it can help an individual.
Yeah. So talk to us about your first marriage, right? You're young, you got married, and against all possible ideas or ways, it didn't work out.
Well, to me, I grew up in a home with a loving mom and dad, and we have deep, faith in marriage and family. And it was like, once you get married, you've arrived, right? Like you've done it. We had worked hard for 7 years and had been in and out of counseling, and we had just got transferred back to Boise, Idaho, which is our hometown. And I'd been teaching for 6 years, and I had just finished my master's degree in education, and I was like, we're doing it. It's working. We had baby girl number 3, and all within a month of our move, the master's, the baby, I was told by my wife at the time that she wanted to separate. And I found myself 28 years old, living in my parents' basement. The circumstances led to me not being able to teach. And so I've now lost my job. I'm homeless, right? Living with my parents. I've lost my family, my marriage. And I believe that I had failed God ultimately.
And how long were you in that season of like desperation and despair and just, like where it's like none of this makes sense. It wasn't part of the plan. I was doing everything right and it still didn't work.
Yeah, it took a good 12 to 18 months before I stopped blaming myself.
And how, like, what were the things that you did to get onto the path of not blaming yourself?
Well, in my book, chapter 1, it talks about being grounded, which is a funny word because we think grounded when we talk about our kids, like, or when we were little and our parents grounded us, and there's very negative connotation there. But to be grounded, someone who loves nature like you and I, is to be connected to the earth, right? To actually have that electrical connection to the earth. And what I did was I started reading, started watching videos, and I did all things that I could to immerse myself in personal growth and development. And I recognized that the people I surrounded myself with and the books that I was reading were helping to get me back into that state of stability where I could feel grounded and I could feel connected, not just right to the earth, but to me, to my purpose, to God, to others. And so I just did everything I could to get myself grounded.
Yeah. And how much did your family that you grew up in play in this time of your life? Were they supportive? Were they questioning you? What was that like?
Well, they were beyond supportive, and I feel very fortunate to have 4 older siblings and to have parents that literally just took me into their home. I would show up at someone's house and they'd feed me dinner, and I'd stay late at night and cry my eyes out. And they were just phenomenal, just a team of angels, I would call them.
Yeah. No, I talk about from climbing mountains that big mountains take big teams.
Yes.
And when you're doing this big thing of soul searching and why did this happen and how do I get out of this and what's my purpose, having that supportive community or environment is so critical in our recovery or our rebuild.
I've heard
Yeah.
it said before that your environment will always be stronger than your willpower. And discipline is challenging if we don't have that environment to support us. So I've always been a big fan of changing my environment physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, getting myself in places and with people that see something in me, right? That believe in me as much or more than I believe in myself.
Yeah, it's important to have those people remind us of who we are when we sometimes forget.
It's
Yeah.
essential. I believe in it so much so that I made a career out of it, right? That's what I do as a coach. Like, let me tell you, like, I see something here that you might not see or believe about yourself, and dang it, right on my coattails of belief until you've got your own.
Right, right. And we're allowed to borrow
Yeah,
this courage and this viewpoint from others until we can claim it ours again. Right? I mean, it's okay to say
right.
like, okay, that's not imposter syndrome. That's like, hey, this is who I am. I just haven't stepped into that fully yet because I'm healing.
Yes, we have to. We have to be willing not just to be great leaders, but to allow ourselves to be great followers, to ask for what it is that we need. And that great verse, asking you shall receive, seeking you shall find. Like, if you need and want something, you have to ask for it. Most people are afraid to ask because they don't want to be vulnerable and show that they don't have it all figured out. And that's
Hmm.
where the imposter syndrome comes in that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Have you always had the courage to ask for what you need?
No.
Okay. How did you cultivate that?
Well, it took the breakdown, and there's
Hmm.
always a breakdown before a major breakthrough. And when I see a client getting ready to experience that breakdown, I get excited, and because I know what's on the other side of it. And so we can choose to be humble or we can be compelled to be humble. And for me, it was definitely a compelling experience losing my wife and my family, and my career. And I was forced to be there. There was a choice then that I had to make, but it wasn't something that I initially had made early on.
Right, right. I think some of, I had a car accident. I
Hmm.
think that I needed that car accident to wake up. I needed something that big to be like, whoa, okay, guess what? This game isn't forever. I
Yeah,
better make use of the time that I have to serve while I'm here because it might, I don't get to choose when I leave.
and I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that you did that you did have that turnaround, that breakthrough, because you're benefiting so many people by sharing your story and your message and bringing others along with you.
It's hard to understand when we're in it, but when our pain really does become our purpose, right? Because
Yes.
we understand it so deeply and so intimately that we're able to connect with others in those moments
Hmm.
and lift each other out and help each other elevate each other's lives.
Exactly.
Okay, so when you, like, I read the book, and when you went to your parents' house after everything fell apart and you didn't
Hmm.
continue the job that you had, what was the first job that you got that allowed you to move out of your parents? I mean, you moved into an apartment, you moved out of your parents. What was that first job?
Well, my brother is a consultant. I'm a coach. All of us siblings, we tell people what to do. Our
Nice.
parents have instilled that confidence in us. But before I became a coach, he told me, he said, I think it would be a really good idea for you to get a job where you have 100% of your income through commission, and
Hmm.
you pretend as if you have all the confidence in the world, and you're not going to make money for 7 months, but it will all pay off in the end. And for whatever reason, I believed him. And
Yeah.
so I started um, in real estate sales, in residential real estate sales. And that opened up the doors in an environment where I learned about coaching. And I
Hmm.
recognized that my business would only grow to the extent that I did. And I had my first coach, and I had leaders that saw in me what I couldn't see in myself. And I only had to do that for 1 year before I realized I didn't want to be in the sales part of that world, but I wanted to be in the coaching and the influencing and the leading. And so I've been doing that for the last 9 years.
Yeah. No, and I like that. I think it's really important for people that are listening to understand that sometimes we have these gateway careers,
Yes.
right? I mean, we don't quite know where we want to go yet. We
Mm.
know that what we're doing right now isn't our end all be all, but it gives us stability or gives us experience to say, okay, this is on my path to becoming who I want to become. And just having that courage to step out into that imperfection and
Mhm.
make it work as best as you can.
Right. Yep. And that's what it takes. And
It
most,
does.
like you said, it takes that courage. And I love the word courage. It's on the subtitle, right? The front page of my book, Strength of the Oak, Strength of the Willow, How to Find Courage and Compassion in a Turbulent World. Do you know the etymology, the root of the word courage, Jen?
Tell me, tell all of
Okay,
us.
here we go. Courage comes from the French word coeur, and I speak French fluently, so I promise I'm not making this up. But courage comes from the French word coeur, and coeur means heart. When we have courage, we're willing to give our heart for something. We're willing to give all. And it's not about overcoming fear. It's about not letting our head talk us out of something our heart knows to be true. That's the strength of the oak.
I like that. And how does someone know when their head's trying to hijack their heart? Like, what are those signals?
Well, I think that's such a powerful question. Thank you for asking it. Um, we talk about head and heart as if they're separate, like logical and emotional. And I'm sure that you've heard of studies that share that we actually our heart has neurological abilities to actually have cognition and to create like thinking processes. And I don't think we can separate any of our organs, you know. And
Yeah.
so when I talk about, your head talking out something your heart knows to be true, it's knowing that even though logically it might not make sense, there is something bigger than ourselves, whether that's your life mission, whether that's a calling from divinity, or whether it's just this, insatiable hunger to do something. It usually won't be logical if that's the case.
Yeah.
I've heard it said that if people aren't laughing at your goals, then they're not big enough. So whenever I recognize that logic doesn't align, then I know that I'm on the right path because I need to figure out some new logic. There's something here that I don't know that I need to put into place that looking back someday will make logical sense.
So when you're helping somebody
Hmm.
through their breakdown,
Yeah.
right, to have their breakthrough, what are some things that you give them to help them ground in the experience and just have the patience and perseverance to continue through?
Well, it starts with what I call a life mission that I've mentioned already today. And I'd love to share with you, Jen, which you know because you've read the book, but to reshare. But for your listeners, I'd love to share what makes the oak so strong as a tree. And we use it in so many things in our world. Like they've been building ships out of oak forever. We have hardwood floors, we have cabinets, right? We have barrels. Like there's so many things that are made of the oak because the oak is a strong and sturdy tree in that it has a root system that will grow out horizontally 2 to 3 times the size of its canopy. And before it ever starts to send out those horizontal roots to provide that stability, it will first send down a vertical root. And it will send that vertical root, it's called a tap root, until it taps into a source of water. And once it has that source of water, it never leaves. And it's connected to its source. And I have found, as I've coached hundreds of individuals over the last 9 years, that most people don't have a strong, grounded root system because they don't have that source, that mission, that purpose, that thing that compels them. So when someone is going through a breakdown,
Mm-hmm.
I help them understand, as you said, what is the purpose that is being driven by this pain. And when we can identify a life mission and get them grounded to that source, then it begins to allow us to provide the stability of these horizontal roots that I call principles and values so that we can begin to grow something that maybe we've never had before, new life, as we are able to endure through the pain.
Wow. And what are some examples of purposes that people you've coached with have like determined that was their story?
Yeah. So a life mission is very unique to each individual, and it doesn't have to be something super, profound. And it's not like I want to feed all of the children in Africa, or it can be as simple as one word. I asked this recently on social media. I said, if you could sum up your life mission, one word, what would it be? And I love my parents because they're my greatest fans on social media. And my dad said the word service.
Okay.
And to him, his life mission is to serve others, beginning with his own family. And that really is his life mission. Um, my wife's life mission is truly motherhood, and she's phenomenal at it. And there is no greater calling that anyone could, I think, fulfill than bringing life into and nurturing it to move forward, humanity.
Right.
Other people have life missions of, a love, reaching out and providing loving experiences to every person they encounter. So they're very diverse, but they almost always include someone outside of ourselves. I've never once had someone say, my purpose in life is to make the most amount of money or be the number one YouTuber, or like that's not what it's about. It's always about others.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then what are typical like principles and values that people would like let's take your wife for
Sure.
example, motherhood, which is a extremely honorable, rewarding, amazing pursuit in this world.
Yeah.
What would be principles that would line up and values that would line up to support that mission?
Right. So again, I want just the listener to have this visual of a taproot going vertically down, connecting you to a source, which is a life mission, and then these horizontal roots of principles and values that support and are connected to that life mission that allow you to grow, right, your life, your tree. So values are fascinating, Jen. They are the deeply held, unconscious stuff that drives every decision we make, every goal we set, and every habit we form. And values differ in each area of life. I have different values in my career than I do in my marriage. And I have different values in my marriage than I do in my spirituality. And I have different values in my spirituality than I do in my physical fitness and nutrition. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, some examples of these values for well, I had a couple in my office today. He runs a very successful business, and she is a stay-at-home mom, and she is building out her life mission, he's building out his, and they're coming together and they're learning, how do we fulfill each other's marriage values. His number one marriage value is respect, and some people might look down on that and be like, oh, that is so chauvinistic, like respect, like the man wants respect. But we're judging that because we don't know what respect means to him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And her number one marriage value is connection, and so we're going to let her define, what does connection mean to her, so that he knows how to fulfill that value. And we're going to define what respect means to him so she knows how to fulfill that value. And if I can lift thee and thee can lift me, we both shall ascend together, says the proverb. So those are
Mm-hmm.
some examples of values that we have in just one area of life, like marriage. My number one value for my career is freedom. If I don't feel free, I don't care how passionate I am about it or how much I love it, I have to have freedom. So there's some examples.
Okay. And do you feel like values are, because they're that subconscious thing, like that's always the thing? Like, do values change or evolve, or are values pretty like standard?
They can change and evolve if and when our belief system changes and evolves. Let me give you an
Okay.
example. If I am raised in an abusive home where I believe that I am never going to be enough, then if I go throughout my life, then my values will reflect those beliefs. And if I go through a mental and emotional release breakthrough session like I do with clients, where we spend 5 hours together letting go of all of the baggage that doesn't support us, then I'm going to value different things. In fact, in that breakthrough session, we actually look at values before and after the breakthrough. And it's fascinating that people will give me completely different words on day two than they gave me just literally 18 hours ago on day one. So values change when beliefs change.
Fair. That makes sense.
So the
And
second thing you asked me,
okay.
sorry to interrupt, was about principles.
Yes.
So principles are the guiding rules that we live by that are connected to what we value, which are connected to our life mission. So principles are the rules we live by. For example, one of the principles, I have five. I'm not going to share them all because I'll let you read the book, but I'll share one of my top principles in life, and that is to respect other people's model of the world. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it, But if I can respect another's model of the world, then I stay out of judgment and I can forgive and I can love and I can have empathy. But the moment that I start judging and I can't respect another's model of the world, then I become a victim. And so does everyone else. So that's an example of a principle. Respect for others' model of the world.
Ooh, I like that one. I might have to borrow that principle.
Take
That's a
it.
good one.
It's all yours.
Well, it just allows you to be like, okay, that's different, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Like I catch myself
Mm-hmm.
when I was in in London, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're driving on the wrong side of the road. No,
Yeah,
they're not. They're driving on a different side of the road. You
right.
have to be very careful of like these little words that sneak into our vocabulary that all of a sudden like form our perspective of what's going on.
That's right.
Yeah.
You got it.
Wow. Okay, so when somebody does the work with you and has the breakthrough,
Yes.
it's not this like one-time event, right? Don't you feel like you kind of you might get to the panacea of where you want to go, but then you're just not, you saw it, you felt it for a minute, but I don't find many people from what I've seen like all of a sudden just live there. Now it's this like little cha-cha movement of, oh, this is old patterns, this is new, this is old, this is new, to get to that full breakthrough. Have
Right.
you found the same?
Well, there are four things that have to happen in order for true transformation to take place, Jen. I don't believe that most well intentioned counselors and therapists are ever able to get past number one, which I'll share with you here in a moment. And I believe most coaches have no idea how to do number one, so they just jump right to number two. So here they are. Okay.
Okay.
In NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, I'm a master practitioner of NLP. It's what made Tony Robbins famous. I'm just 30 years behind him. So in NLP, the four things that have to happen for transformation to take place is number one, we must get rid of negative emotions and limiting beliefs that were created based upon limiting decisions, as well as knowing what our values are and integrating any and all conflicting parts within us. That's all step one. Removing negative emotions, limiting beliefs, integrating conflicting parts, and knowing your values. Most counselors and therapists, they spend a lot of time working on that. And I don't want to bash or speak down on any counselor therapist, just like I wouldn't a teacher. But we know
Mm-hmm.
that there are a lot of counselors, therapists, and teachers in our community that aren't actually doing as much good as we would hope. So that's step number one. Most coaches have no idea how to do that. So they jump to number two, which is once we've think about a garden, we've gotten all of that stuff out, we've cleared the soil, and we've got this clean slate of dirt to plant in. Then we can create a new goal, a new future by planting new neural pathways, actually like new beliefs, instilling new outcomes into the unconscious mind. So that's the second step. We have to create that future. And then if they don't do number three, nothing that we did in steps 1 and 2 actually works. Number three is they have to take action. They have to actually plant what it is that they desire. And then number four, this is the funnest one. Number four is they have to continue to move toward what it is they want.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas most people, Jen, are moving away from what they don't want. And if we can help them stay focused on what they want and move toward it, staying in alignment with their values and keeping that goal in sight, taking action, those four things are what create lasting transformation. But it all starts with removing those limiting beliefs and negative emotions.
And what do you find is the best way for people to start recognizing what those limiting beliefs and emotions are? Because I don't know if people always consciously are aware of them.
You're so right. It's emotional intelligence, and we use that a lot. And we just don't teach it. We don't teach it in our homes. We don't teach it in our schools. It's the ability to take an emotion and disassociate from it, like recognize that that's not who you are. You are not depressed. That's not you. Okay. An emotion is a chemical reaction in the body based upon a thought. And we can make ourselves feel many things by just staying in a place of thought and fantasy, right? And that's what dreams are. You can run a marathon and sweat your guts out in a dream and have a physical reaction to something that took place in your mind. You can also cheat on your spouse or have a sexual experience and experience what that feels like physically without actually having done it. So when it comes to emotional intelligence, we first have to recognize that the emotion, it's not who we are. It's just a reflection of our thoughts. So that awareness is step number one.
And so, do you have people like journal, or what do you do so they start becoming aware of these thoughts that they don't feel are serving them, so that they can start addressing them?
Um, I I like fast results. I think you're kind of the
Yeah.
same person. So instead of dragging them through this long, painful process of awareness, we actually come in to my office, whether it's here on Zoom or if it's physically here in Boise, Idaho, and we sit down and we identify everything in the first hour of our work together in this 4 to 5 hour break session. We identify all the emotions that they are holding on to that aren't serving them, along with the limiting beliefs. And then in that same session over, that 1 to 2 day period, depending on how we do it, we get rid of them. Because if we go into a doctor and we say, I'm having this pain, he doesn't say, okay, I want you to go home for the next 3 weeks and journal about your pain, right?
Yep. Right.
We want to figure out what caused it so we can heal it, and rather than just treating the symptoms. And that's what I think a lot of counseling and therapy does. Okay, I want you to go home and journal. And every time you feel something, I want you to write about it so you can become aware of it. That's great. But when you're climbing one of the largest peaks in the world and you have extra baggage that isn't serving you, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You
You
get
leave.
rid of it. You
Yeah.
don't hold on to it and talk about it and bring it with you on your journey. That's ridiculous. We
Hmm.
want to get rid of it as soon as possible.
And do you find that when, like, sometimes you get rid of something and then all of a sudden it opens a layer to another thing that you didn't know exist?
If I
Or,
do my job right
yeah.
as the practitioner, we get all the way down to the core, because it doesn't take very long. And a lot of people in this session, they will say to me, I just learned more about myself in 60 to 90 minutes than I did in, like, literally, a woman said, 21 years of therapy.
Wow.
And so if we do it right, and I'm not saying this from a place of ego. It's the system, right? People are doing this all around the world. It's called mental and emotional release therapy. The system works, and we can get to the core beliefs and the emotions. And then, just like, think of a pearl necklace. Once we cut off that first pearl where the knot is, everything else comes off with it.
It's good. It's good. It's
So
good.
good.
Right?
So good.
Everybody listening, you hear this?
Yeah,
You don't have to spend years in therapy. We have options.
we do.
We have options, options, options. Life's just short. Like, you
Yeah.
want to make the most of these moments while we have them, because it does it. I mean, anybody who has a child understands this.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, you're driving a car? I have to get you a car? Like, how did this happen?
Yes. Anyone who has a child or has been a child, because honestly, if we can just get people to remember what it was like, to go through that process, then we remember really quickly, like, how imperfect this whole thing called life and our journey is. We're all just failing our way forward, and hopefully we can forgive each other along the way and pick each other up.
Yeah. So if you have a friend, right,
Yeah.
like that's struggling with something, that's in that dark moment of the soul, like, what is the first step that they would do to, like, start sorting through it? We find you, we work with you, or like, what do you give people as a tool before they can get into your office?
Yeah, so I want them to hear my story. And I don't know
Okay.
what it is about me being so vulnerable, but it just gives people permission to do the same. And until we're in a
Mm,
state of humility, truly humble and vulnerable, then we can't have new life grow. Again, word nerd here, author guy. Like, humility comes from the root word
mm-hmm.
humus. Hum is of the earth, and until the earth is broken, we can't plant the seed. And until the seed is broken, it can't sprout. And until the ground breaks again, it can't come through to the surface. And until that pod breaks, it can't actually bring forth the flower. And until the flower dies and breaks, it can't send forth new seeds. And so the number one step is to help people get into a state of humility and vulnerability. And sharing our stories, I think, is one of the most powerful ways to gain that trust and help others do so as well.
No, I agree. And your book does such a good job at, like, bringing the reader into that moment And even if you haven't had your exact experience, you've had that feeling that is manifested a different way. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can apply this to me, even though it looks a little bit different. No, we talked about the
Yeah.
oak.
Right.
I want you to talk about the willow a little bit. We can't leave the willow
Absolutely.
out. It's on the
Yes.
cover.
Right. It's they go hand in hand. And the strength of the willow is not a competing strength to the strength of the oak. It's a complementary strength, right? They go together. You can't have one without the other. And whereas the oak is hard and it lives for as long as we, like thousands of years sometimes, a willow is graceful. If the strength of the oak is summed up in one word, courage, the strength of the willow is summed up in one word, compassion. It's the ability to bend without breaking, to allow life's storms to rip through you, and being able to allow our branches to fall. And the thing that I love about the willow tree, and when I learned this, I was like, oh, so cool. A willow tree, when it loses its branches, all it has to do is have one of those branches go into the ground and it will immediately start to grow another tree. And this is why you see willows along the banks of water, lakes, ponds, and rivers, because it's a perfect environment for those branches to fall into the ground, and that the dirt is wet and it's easy for it to plant new life. And so that strength of the willow is the grace, the compassion, the humility, the vulnerability, and the willingness to surrender, to give in to life storms, and recognize that when we do have some branches that fall off, we can produce new life, start again.
Yeah. And willows grow fast.
Yes, they do.
Too. I mean, I think they can grow like a foot a year or something. I had a willow tree and I'm like, okay, we need to chill out just a little bit. You're going to take over the whole lawn.
Right.
I love it. Okay, so how do people, we buy your book on Amazon, but what's the best way to connect with you and get all the good that you share with the world?
Right. So yeah, certainly you can read the book. You can follow me on social media at Andrew L. Anderson 85. And then for your people, I know you have a tribe of very driven, successful, purposeful, like the people that are a part of this podcast, like they take life seriously. And I would love to offer to the first 3 people that would like to spend 30 minutes with me, they can go to freecall.andrewlanderson.com. And I know you'll put that in the notes, but again, it's freecall.andrewlanderson.com. And for the first 3 people that would like, I would gladly spend 30 minutes with them to discover what's inside them, the life mission that's yearning to be fulfilled.
Oh, I love this. So much good, Andrew. I'm so glad that you have turned your breakdown into a breakthrough and now are serving so many people and have that vulnerability key that allows all of us to be humbled together and feel like we're on this journey with somebody that sees us, understands us, and is going to help us get to that next level. So thank you for doing your work.
You're welcome. And I want to just leave one last thought with your listener, and it's this. It's not by chance that you have made it to the end of this recording, this podcast. You stuck with us. And there's something that's calling you. And that calling is a calling to serve. And you don't have to wait until you've done this work with someone like me. You don't have to wait until you have an eloquent life mission like I do. Or all you need to do is step outside yourself and serve someone. And in serving others today, like right now, like literally, like you get off and you put your phone or device down and you go out and you serve someone, you'll find that purpose and passion. And that would be my one ask of you today, even more so than getting my book or anything else. Like, go serve someone.
I love it. I'm going to do it right after we hang up. Thank you.